he was also a big Zionist. He was a big Zionist, and in fact, this I found this interesting. This is an article talking about Emanuel Seller of the Hart-Celler Act, where it says Representative Emanuel Seller, who called on President Truman at the White House, told reporters that Truman stands solidly behind Roosevelt's stand on Zionism. The president will not deviate one iota from the platform of the Democratic Party, which calls for a democratic Jewish commonwealth in Palestine. So Roosevelt was a big-time Zionist. And you might say, well, that's not too crazy. I mean, okay, so one of his ancestors, their last name sounds kind of Jewy, and he's a Zionist. I mean, fuck, he's an American politician. How many of them aren't Zionists? Well, back in the 30s, quite a lot of them, actually. But then you take a look at Roosevelt's administration and his closest advisors. For example, I mean, just already, you look up Jew in the dictionary. That is Henry Morgenthau. Henry Morgenthau, of course, famously of the Morgenthau Plan, the vindictive plan that was rolled out to punish Germany after World War II. He was the Jew that devised that plan. But he was also... Oops, my notes got all weird for some reason. He was also the U.S. Secretary of Treasury for FDR. He was one of FDR's closest advisors, especially in economic and financial matters, of course. He played a key role in shaping the New Deal. The New Deal, which basically redefined the role and purpose of the federal government, and some would even say the structure and really the character of our country forever. He was also instrumental in financing World War II. He was always pushing for the United States' involvement into World War II prior to us entering the war. And he was also very instrumental in welcoming the Jewish refugees from Europe before, during, and after World War II. So you might say, well, I mean, that's one guy. It's the Secretary of Treasury. So he's got a Secretary of Treasury that's Jewish. That's not really that big of a deal, except for we got this guy. Felix Frankfurter. One of the first Jews nominated to the Supreme Court, appointed by FDR. He was the Associate Justice of the Supreme Court from 1939 to 1962. He was a close personal friend of FDR and one of his many legal and political advisors before his Supreme Court appointment. He was also the co-founder of the ACLU, a Jewish organization, not unlike the ADL, that used the exploited vulnerabilities in the Constitution and in constitutional law to defend pornographers and other degenerates. In fact, at some point, they even had to bend the knee to try to look as if they weren't just there to help out Jewish interests. And I think in a couple instances, they even supported Nazis. That, of course, has all gone out the window. You won't see the ACLU sticking up for, say, streamers that get demonetized or kicked off of YouTube for free speech issues. So you might think, okay, so big deal. So he appointed a Jewish Supreme Court justice. No big deal. Well, there's always this guy too. This is Benjamin Cohen, FDR's legal advisor and member of Roosevelt's brain trust, is what they called it. Those big brain Jews. They called it the brain trust. Cohen was a key architect of the New Deal legislation. He was particularly focused on the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and the Public Utility Holding Company Act of 1935. Working with fellow Jew Thomas Cochran Cohen. And was instrumental in formulating many of the legal foundations of the New Deal. So you're like, okay, well, big deal. So there's a few Jews within his inner circle. It happens. You got this guy, Samuel Rosenman. This was FDR's speechwriter. FDR's speechwriter was a Jew. He served as speechwriter and legal counsel, so he was also FDR's lawyer. He was one of FDR's main speechwriters, and he came up with the term New Deal. He helped draft all of FDR's major addresses, sometimes just writing them entirely himself, and remained a key advisor throughout World War II and handled all the public messaging for World War II. That's interesting. So we got a lot of Jews close to FDR, kind of administrating the World War II so far. All right, well, I'm starting to think where maybe this guy's coming from, thinking maybe FDR's a little Jewish. I don't know, but yeah. So a speechwriter, Supreme Court Justice, Secretary of Treasury. I mean, it's not a bit. No, there's this guy, Herbert Lehman. Now, he was governor of New York from 1933 to 1942. He was Director General of the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. So, not only was he governor of New York while FDR was president, and he campaigned with FDR, but he was also put in charge of a lot of the new responsibilities that were coming out of the UN that was being developed after World War II. And he administered a lot of the distribution of aid going to other countries post World War II. So we got a Jew in charge of that. Okay. Well, it's not that weird, I guess, right? Oh, we got this guy, David Niles. David Niles was the advisor on minority affairs, obviously including Jewish issues. He was a key advisor on minority issues, including matters related to Jewish refugees and the broader Jewish community. He also served as an advisor on the Jewish affairs for Presidents Harry Truman, Dwight Eisenhower. So he was like the Jewish liaison for 3 presidents. But he started under Roosevelt's administration. Okay, well, you gotta have a Jewish liaison, right? I mean, right? That's not too abnormal to have a Jewish liaison. And we have this guy. Louis Brandeis. I think that's how you say it. I'm not sure. He was another Jewish Supreme Court justice put on the court by FDR. Wow, two. Two. Two of the first ever. In fact, there had only been one other prior to that. So he doubled the amount of Jews that had ever been on the court. Okay, that's interesting. He was particularly. Actually, this is the wrong Jew. There's another one. This guy was on the court. This is the first Jew on the court, but he was on the court during. There's another Jew coming up. This guy was the first Jew on the Supreme Court, and so he was appointed before Roosevelt, but he served during the Roosevelt presidency, and he was an advisor to FDR, particularly on matters related to Zionism and the Jewish community. He was a vocal advocate of Jewish causes and played an indirect but important role in the advocating Zionism under the FDR administration. Okay. Well, so it's starting to be a lot of Jews. We have this chick. Well, she's not a Jew though. She's not a Jew. She's just a blue-haired feminist. She's like the proto blue-haired feminist, who is tightly wrapped up in with Jewish organizations. Her name was Frances Perkins. She was the Secretary of Labor. And while she wasn't Jewish herself, she worked closely with Jewish leaders, some of whom I've already named, and labor activists. In other words, communists. She was a communist. Let's just not beat around the bush. She was a communist, and she was the liaison between the FDR administration and Jewish communists. I mean, if we want to not try to gussy it up, that's basically what her job was. And so she was the go-between between FDR and Jewish communists in the labor movements going on in the United States at the time. Okay. Well, no big deal, right? At least she wasn't a Jew. Who's this? This is Sidney Hillman. He was also a labor advisor. His position was leader of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America. He was the key labor advisor to FDR. He was a communist. He was one of those communists I was just mentioning. Strong supporter of FDR and the New Deal, which was an effort to make the United States more communist. He served as a key labor advisor to FDR and played a major role in mobilizing labor support for the president. So in other words, he got those commie votes, those labor union votes in for FDR. Especially during World War II, because when that war machine, started going, a lot of his clients were making a lot of money. A lot of money producing those war machines. Okay, well, some labor Jews and a bunch of... Oh, this guy! This is Isidore Lobin, economic advisor. He was the commissioner of labor statistics, as well as an economic advisor to FDR. He was an important economic advisor to FDR, particularly on the labor and economic data. He played a key role in shaping the New Deal labor policies and was a trusted statistician who provided vital economic information during Roosevelt's administration. There seems to be like a whole lot of Jews that seem to be behind this New Deal thing. It seems like a lot of Jews. I mean, this is very unusual. I don't know. We got this guy. Julius Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald, who was he was basically just a turbo Jew money Jew. You know, the kind of Jew money where you just get called, oh, he's a philanthropist, which just means he's got an infinite ball of money. And he was a big donor to FDR, but also he was a big donor to African American organizations that Jews were just starting to spin up. One might say he was also a communist, and that was the motivation for creating these African American organizations that would later on blossom into the organizations that we know and love today. He served as an advisor relating to Jewish charities and refugees. Big donor, big Jew donor, advising FDR on what we should do with all these Jewish refugees. Okay, well, and then we got this guy. Joseph Proskauer. He was a judge, an advisor, and legal counsel for FDR. He was a prominent Jewish judge, advised FDR on Jewish issues. That's odd. I wonder if there was anyone advising him on Christian issues. Or Muslim issues, or Buddhist issues for that matter. Particularly related to the refugees from Europe. Oh, look at that. Another rich money Jew advising FDR on what we should do with all these European Jews that were flooding into our country. He was president of the American Jewish Committee during the war and worked closely with Roosevelt on Jewish refugee matters. So in other words, another money Jew making sure that the gates were wide open for all those European Jews flooding into our country before, during, and after World War II. Okay, well, all right, so there's some definite Jewish influence there, but this doesn't seem that crazy. There's another one. Nathan Strauss, administrator and advisor. He was the head of the U.S. Housing Authority. That's a nice position to have when you're crafting the New Deal. I wonder if he had any input on where we put all of these Jewish refugees. He's also just a big money Jew. He's the kind of big money Jew that didn't really have a job. He's called a philanthropist. Oh, philanthropist. Where do you go to school to become that? I sure wish I had a degree in philanthropy. Seems like it pays really well. He worked closely with FDR on housing reform and public welfare projects, and basically helped expand the welfare programs that would later lead to places like Bessemer. You want to know why white flight would happen a few decades later? Well, you're looking at it. That was a big part of it. A lot of federal money giving black people free places to live right in the middle of white neighborhoods, while also providing housing for Jews flooding into the country before, during, and after World War II. Okay, well, all right, no big deal. You know, just another Jew. I got another one. Got Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, another Jewish advisor on Jewish affairs. You know, that's another thing about FDR. He seems to have a lot of advisors on Jewish affairs. It's an odd title. Seems to be an awful lot of these guys that have that title. He was a prominent Zionist leader. He was a major leader in the American Jewish community, frequently communicated with FDR about Jewish matters, especially concerning the situation of European Jews flooding into the country before, during, and after World War II. I'm starting to pick up on a pattern here. It's a little bit odd. I'm kind of seeing a little bit of a pattern here. I'm sure that's not going to keep... Oh, my God! Lawrence Steinhardt. Lawrence Steinhardt was an ambassador. He was the ambassador to Turkey and the Soviet Union. Well, that's kind of a key position, right? Especially during World War II. So you've got a Jew that is now the ambassador to the Soviet Union during World War II. You've got the guy who's bankrolling World War II, who's Jewish. You got the guy writing all the speeches for FDR. He's Jewish. You have all of his legal counsel that are Jewish. The guys writing the New Deal, they're all Jewish. You know, it's funny. I don't know about you guys. It's been a long time since I was in elementary school, but I couldn't get over, in fact, a lot of that stuff in one ear and out the other. But if there's one thing that stuck with me and it was consistent, was how every year when we would do American history, every grade, they have varying levels of complexity as you get older, but they always seem to cover the New Deal. And the teachers always seemed to really like FDR. And I thought it was odd at the time because they also seemed to hate other presidents. And I was a kid, I couldn't really put it together. But one thing that I could very easily understand at that age was, wow, all these teachers really like FDR. My textbook really likes FDR. And as much as they love FDR, and we watch movies, which also is weird. All the Hollywood movies seems to depict FDR as like this really great guy. I don't think I've ever seen a film, and I don't think one exists, where FDR is anything but a hero.